People who left someone at the altar. What made you do it? And what was the fallout? My buddy was engaged to be married. Everything was going great. Up until about 2 months before the wedding, when the bride freaked out about something very minor during a family vacation and stopped speaking to him. They would text once a day so the other knew they were okay. They would say, "I love you," and she would assure him she still wanted to get married. 1 month before the wedding, she called it off. They still hadn't talked except for the texts. So he called all his people and told them the wedding was off. Only he forgot about one of his friends who had been on his fiance's list as he was a mutual friend. Mutual friends still went to the wedding where he found a wedding. The woman had been seeing someone on the side, still went through with the wedding, but to a different guy. All on my friend's dime. He left her in charge on cancelling everything. Wow. Yes, wow. That is insane. No way did she have another wedding with another guy. That is honestly crazy. I've never actually, when you see in films and like television shows of people leaving someone at the altar or just not turning up to the wedding, I never think that actually happens in real life. Do you know what I mean? Like, you just think that's something that you see on a film. But these things actually happen in real life, and we're about to find out people's stories. That to me is it's insane. My wife was set to be a bridesmaid in this wedding of her college friend. It was an out of state wedding, and they had people coming in from all over the USA and Europe for this. Expensive sort of deal. Just my wife's dress was over $1,000 easy. 5 days before the wedding, the groom called the whole entire thing off. The reason? He was Church of Christ and she was a Baptist, and according to him, she was in the wrong church, and since she wouldn't join his church, then he had to break it off. To the weeping bride's credit, her parents did pay back everyone, including my wife the money for her bridesmaid dress. My mum called off a wedding to a man she was engaged to before she met my dad. It was only 1 week before. She said they got into an argument over something very trivial, something having to do with cows. But it was enough of a wake-up call for her to realise they were not right for each other. I know this man, and she was right not to marry him. There were people that did not get word the wedding was cancelled and showed up at the church. So I had to ask my mum what the deal with the cows was. I guess they passed by a pasture, and my mum commented on how lovely the sound of cowbells are, and basically told her she was dumb for caring. You can always tell the character of a man by his opinions on cows. Not quite at the altar, but an ex-girlfriend was at a bachelorette party at a seedy male strip club. She came home from the party and said, "Well, the wedding's off." She said the bride was getting the usual treatment, sitting in a chair with strippers gyrating around her, whipping dongs around, and then one put whipped cream on his D and invited her to lick it off, which she did, with her tonsils, until the stripper shoots his load all over the front of her "I'm the bride" t-shirt. About this moment, the bride kind of comes to her senses, looks around and sees like 20 of her friends pointing cell phones at her, recording and taking photos, and she starts freaking out. My girlfriend says she started screaming at everyone, "You better delete that crap!" and generally having a full rage meltdown, which is apparently tough to take seriously when you're bastard in stripper juice. This tale of modern romance closes very shortly later with the bride's phone ringing a call from her fiancé, who has already received photos from her friends of his bride-to-be with a D stuffed in her mouth. Whoa, you would be so embarrassed, wouldn't you? That is bad behavior, Missy. Very bad behavior. I wonder if they got married in the end. As someone who was left at the altar, that sucked. I was dating this girl for 5 years. I popped the question and she happily agreed. 10 months in and the day had come. Everything was fine until that question from the padre. I didn't notice it first, but someone walked as a guest to watch. And she literally changed her tone. Her demeanour instantly changed. So when the padre asked the question, she said aloud, "No," and she walked away with someone. As it turns out, she was cheating on me with some dude for 1 year. Apparently that dude knew about our wedding and walked in to scoop her out. I was left with severe anger. Not even a shred of sadness, just extremely fuming. I screamed at her family and mine to get the frick out of the church and let me be. Soon after, the sadness came in, but I got over her surprisingly quick. Took me about 4 months, which was good because I found out the dude was using her hard-earned savings for his meth addiction. Last thing I heard from, she's living in a homeless shelter. Thank the heavens I had no kids with that witch. I'm happily married to someone else now, with kids. Why even let it get that far if you're just going to say no and go with somebody else? I'd be fuming too. Not entirely on message, but we almost called off our wedding the day before. Her dad had a massive heart attack and almost died 2 days beforehand. He had surgery, died 2 or 3 times during it. We got like 7 hours of sleep over 2 nights and 3 days. He was in the ICU up until the ceremony. He then showed up and walked her down the aisle with an automatic defibrillator vest, then sat in a wheelchair, thank goodness. My emotions were all over the place. I don't know how she kept it together. Oh, the fact he made it there for her, though, with an automatic defibrillator. Oh, wow, that is just so sweet. We almost had to call my wedding off because my dad was in the hospital suffering from a bad liver. It was a very scary time. My dad was released a few days before the ceremony and was able to walk me down the aisle. I'm forever grateful that he was there for me on my special day, like he was for everything important to me in my life. Unfortunately, I lost him in February of this year. As someone who married someone who should have left me standing at the altar, instead of dragging a lie on for another 10 years with all the nasty consequences, I applaud you for doing the right thing before the ring. Sorry to hear that. Hopefully you're out of that relationship now. I just found out my mum called off her wedding, pretty late in the process. This was in the 1960s, and the formal wedding announcement with photos had already been posted in the newspaper. Because that's the thing that people used to do. I don't know. She and her fiance, who I'll call Steve, had met in college, gotten pregnant, and gave the baby up for adoption. They then continued to date for another 3 years, got engaged when my mum was 21, and called off the wedding a month before the ceremony. Turns out that giving a baby up in college is a real bonding experience, and all your friends will be like, "Oh my god, I can't believe you guys survived that together. You're such a great couple. You're such role models," etc., etc. When in actuality, you're in frigging college and you're just figuring out who you are as a person. And maybe that means that you're not meant to be together. She says that everyone just assumed they'd get married, so they were going to, because where else do you go after the adoption? Luckily, they realised they were just going along with the motions in time. My mum says it was no hard feelings between her and Steve, that they met up every 3 to 5 years just to see what's up with the other, and she has no regrets, unlike her actual marriage to my father. But hey, she got me out of that deal, so it wasn't all that bad. Meanwhile, I just found out, met my 54-year-old sibling for the first time that I hadn't known about. My mum's not sick, but she's getting older, and I guess she felt she needed to get this off her chest and tell me before it was too late. Turns out, my secret sister is a fricking CrossFit trainer with arms like cannons, so I have no genetic excuse for not being able to do a pull-up. Also, my mum is cool as frick, and I think this whole story makes her even cooler. Not quite at the altar, but a few weeks before the wedding, I left my fiancé. We'd been together for years, and the proposal was really half-assed. Like, he was asking because we'd been together so long and it seemed like that was the next thing to do. Not because he actually was excited about marrying me. I'd been unhappy with him for a long time, but his emotional abuse had convinced me that this was the best relationship I was ever going to find, so I stayed. My mum came to visit a month before the wedding and saw how miserable I was. She said, "You don't have to marry him if it won't make you happy." It was such a simple thing to say, but it was like someone finally gave me permission to consider my own feelings for the first time in years, and it changed my whole perspective. I called it off, moved out, and got some agency over my own life, and am now living happily ever after. I realised I forgot to include the fallout everyone asked for. Lost money on deposits, managed to sell the dress for half of what I paid, left all the high-ticket items I'd purchased during the relationship behind to avoid staying any longer to fight with him. I'd pay it all 10 times over to again feel the immediate relief I felt when I left our house for the last time, and I'd pay it 1,000 times over to keep the life I have now without him. Woo, you a boss ass beat. You a boss ass beat. Leading up to our wedding, my wife and I started having more stress as is normal. Things weren't going well with her mother, who would complain about not being included and then not show up or show up late when we tried to include her in planning activities. When my wife's dress came in, she had to go and get it fitted, and at the same time we had to take care of something with the florist. So we'd asked my future mother-in-law to take care of the florist while I took my wife to the dress shop. We arrived at the dress shop and everything was going well, but then my mother-in-law backed out at the last minute, so I had to go take care of the florist. I guess that meant I left my wife at the altar. I didn't leave her at the altar. I was the one that was left. It happened not the day of the wedding, but just a couple days before it, when literally guests from all over the country had already arrived and the last of the 40k had been spent on everything wedding related. It was the devastatingly worst day of my life. She didn't even tell me in person. She called me and told me while I was at work that we were not getting married. I was a complete mess. Called my brother to ask him if he would notify everyone. I drove straight to my parents' house and locked myself in the guest room for a week. Never knew so much liquid could come out of someone's face for such a long period of time. It's been a journey, but I'm better off for it today. It definitely still hurts, but at least there's some light in my life now. There is a bit of a backstory, but basically, she deeply betrayed my trust about a year before the wedding. And from that day forward, my confidence fell, and it was apparent I didn't feel like an equal in the relationship. So, she essentially didn't feel as doted upon or loved as she once was, which is true. Anyway, yeah, the saying is true. When you hit rock bottom, the only way out is up. 40k? Holy frick. I know weddings can get expensive, but that is a lot more expensive than I would imagine. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of this video, and have a wonderful day. Well, I'd already taken the communion, so I figured I'd go sit down, but the priest had to stay up there and feed a few more people. As far as I can be from the target group, but this month I was supposed to get married. Got a suit, rings, papers. I was dating this woman for 2 years. Long distance relationship. I went there several times, and all was going well. She even picked up this month because some astrology BS. So I went to her country for 3 months. Longest I've been. The whole time she was acting like a stranger. I felt like I was some burden to her. She was increasingly careless about me, with ever increasing demands. We didn't even get close to the altar. Actually, I was spending most of my time by myself, in a foreign country with no friends. Yeah, I tried to make things work, but effort needs effort from both sides, not just effort from one side and increasing demands from the other. Oh, that's so sad. I wonder why she switched. Something else must have been going on. One of my sister's friends. It was a few years back. It was an arranged Indian wedding, and the lady was initially very accepting and happy with the groom. They talked and fell in love with each other, leading to the marriage. She was really looking forward to the wedding because she was very much involved in her wedding planning and preparation. So, about 1 month before her wedding, the lady met her high school crush and started to bond with him. Then she fell in love with the high school him. Well, she eloped with the guy just hours before the wedding. Her parents disowned her. She hurt a lot of people doing that. See, usually I'd say something about arranged marriages being not having a great success rate, but you said they fell in love beforehand, which makes her actions freaking terrible. That poor groom thought he'd gotten lucky and been arranged to marry someone who actually loved him, only to be dumped for a high school crush. Do you know if she's still with her crush or did that fall apart? Please say yes. I typed out this whole story pretending to be Emily from Friends, and then I realised she didn't leave Ross at the altar. My shame is great. My ex-fiancé couldn't spell altar. I took pictures. Photographer. Once I finished the stage pictures at the front of the church, the groom handed me a check and I left. No fallout. I think they left me a decent review on Yelp. Was that really random or was that just me? Like, why is that relevant? I'm confused. There she was, lying on the altar. Around me, the other acolytes were chanting, "Blood, blood, blood," but I just couldn't do it. She was such a good dog. I didn't think it was right to sacrifice her to the blood gods. Now my neighbour that lets her dog poo in my yard. Let's just say my eyes glowed red with the power absorbed from her body for 2 whole days. My name is Rachel. I was going to marry a dude because my dad wanted me to. I didn't want to marry Barry, so I went into the bathroom and opened the window. I left and eventually found my old best friend. I even got a boyfriend that I actually love. I knew a lady who got married to a man she met at a bar. She'd known him for less than an hour when he proposed and she accepted. They had a party/wedding at a park and got the marriage annulled within 48 hours. She said she didn't like the way the guy bought produce. He was too choosy. Well, love, that's your own fault. Do you know what I mean? You don't get married to someone you've known for under 24 hours because you're only going to find out things you don't like about them. Went to a wedding where the priest and the groom came out from sanctuary. Then the bride, dressed in regular dress clothes, and her father came out. There was mumbling, and the priest made the announcement. There would be no wedding that day, but there would be a prayer said for the couple and their family and friends. A short reception, 1 hour long at a restaurant on the same block, was held with parents of the couple welcoming the guests. Each had been too scared to cancel. Bride and groom each married others and are still with those spouses. Most civilized and best ending to a rough day. My husband and I eloped too, but we almost called it off because his cousin, who wasn't invited, decided he wanted to see us get married. My mother in law called to tell us this, and we were fuming. We told her he is not invited, and we didn't want him there or his creepy girlfriend. They ended up going to the beach instead and came to hang out with us later. Still fuming that he thought he could just show up for our wedding without an invite. Spoiled frick. I called off an engagement months before the wedding because the bride was too scared of doing it to want it. I couldn't live my life like that. My whole extended family got cancellation notices. They'd never ever gotten the invitation in the first place. Then, 6 months later, she tried to get back together and I turned her down. She immediately came back with a, "Oh, well, I've met someone new and we've expressed deep feelings for each other, so goodbye." I felt sorry for the new guy. She was looking to offload him in favour of me. So how deep did these feelings actually go? I often wondered if I should have gave him a heads up about what just about happened to their relationship. I was a guest on the bride's side, an acquaintance from a previous job that was kind enough to invite me. Everything was going well. She started walking down the aisle, then stopped halfway. Her father and mother came over. She whispered to them, then they all turned around and walked away. The groom immediately followed. Music just kept playing but then slowly drifted away. We all just sat there in dead silence. A couple of minutes later, the father of the bride came back down the aisle and apologised, but there was going to be no wedding today. We all just got up and slowly left. There were a couple of angry family members on the groom's side, but once they talked to the father of the bride, they immediately just left. At the door, the mother of the bride shook my hand and thanked us for coming. Told us that they would explain everything later, but for now we should just head home. The story is that the groom, the night before the ceremony, confessed to the bride that he was gay. He loved her. He still wanted to marry her, provide and raise children, but he needed her to know. She couldn't let him live like that, and it wasn't fair to either of them. Holy frick, imagine that. I wouldn't go ahead with the wedding anyway. I'd be like, get out of here, bro. Geez, you know what I mean? I wouldn't be like, okay, let's just try and get married then. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos coming daily.